would you do if one fateful and treacherous day you had your entire world leveled and obliterated from under your feet? One fateful accident, and you're an artist without hands, an athlete without legs. You're a $1 million businessman with 10 years of hard work and counting. Someone has stolen all your money, and you've been kicked out of your own company. Well, perhaps you're really passionate about music. It's gotten you through some tough times. You lose your hearing to that pain in your eardrums which you thought would go away by itself. Oh, I see. You're a family man. You love your wife, you love your son, you love your little daughter. Well, that's very nice. A gang of sadists enters your wonderful home with a hammer, a lighter, and a switchblade. They don't want your money, they don't want your jewelry, nothing that you own, but only the life of your beautiful wife and your little ones too. What would you do if one fateful and treacherous day the foundation of your entire world was leveled and obliterated right before your eyes? Think of the worst, most disadvantageous thing you could ever conceive, and let it happen suddenly and without warning or preparation. How would one build back from such a terrible thing? How would one recreate that which is irreplaceable? And would one even have the strength to do anything meaningful at all? Worst case scenario, you don't know how to deal with this terrible and world-ending catastrophe. So I thought about some options, the possible courses of action one could take to get back up on their feet. Or not. The hypothesis is that these supposed courses of action could be boiled down to two bilateral paths, similar to a coin, which ultimately solves the same issue, no matter which side it falls. And these being that one either treads down the path of self-overcoming, or goes down the path of self-annihilation. Now here are 4 encompassing categories, which may fit upon this road of right and left. One could find new passions, such as art. Strange as it is, the most miserable people tend to produce the most remarkable works of human creativity and intelligence. This of course is seen in art, literature and philosophy. Soren Kierkegaard had 6 siblings. 5 of them died of disease, including his mother, all before he was 21 years old. 21 years old, can you believe? The last one to survive nearly went insane and had to resign from religious office as bishop. And Soren Kierkegaard himself died at 42 years old. What a life to live! Still, he is famously known for all these theological and philosophical bangers. I mean, miserable titles and all, but they really do hit. Beethoven couldn't hear his own music. Sure, you've heard of Beethoven, but did you know the man couldn't hear his own music? He suffered hearing loss in his mid-20s when he was an up-and-coming rapper, and you'd think he called it quits then and gave up. But he lived on for 30 more years, dishing out bangers to become the legend he is now, absent the function of his ears. I cannot imagine I'd be so enthusiastic about art if I were to lose my eyesight. Though blind artists do exist, by the way. I also can't name a single song of his, by the way, but probably I've heard many of them in all those sophisticated movies and TV shows. Just read about how terrible Ernest Hemingway's life was. He was a veteran who participated in 3 separate wars. He suffered from malaria, dysentery, skin cancer, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, 6 damaging and untreated concussions, which caused him headaches, mental fogginess, ringing in his ears, in addition to traumatic brain injury. He nearly died in 2 separate plane crashes in 2 days, which ruptured his spleen, liver, kidneys, sprained several limbs, dislocated his shoulder, crushed his vertebrae, left first-degree burns all over his body, and cracked his skull so severe that cerebral brain fluid seeped out of his ear. He had chronic pain, which he numbed with severe alcohol abuse, and ultimately was so physically and mentally destroyed. He tried committing suicide on several occasions, some of which include rushing to his house from the hospital under a fluke and loading a shotgun to the face. He was restrained, but later on tried walking into a spinning plane propeller before takeoff, and when this didn't work he tried jumping out the aircraft twice on the same day. The man was suffering and wanted out. On a brighter note, he was able to calm down after all these attempts, and was released after years of effective hospitalization and much needed treatment, and went on to live the rest of his life in a calm and tranquil— Just kidding, what is this, a video with a happy ending? He immediately rushed to his impressive gun collection and embraced his favorite double-barrel shotgun. Nonetheless, he is still hailed as one of the 20th century's greatest writers. I've never read a single book from Ernest Hemingway, by the way. I have heard of them in songs and movie references, though. On the matter of Hemingway's suicide, it could be argued that he did this thing because, in the end, he could no longer do that which gave purpose to his life. The depression, the delusions, the paranoia, and the brain fogginess. Neither did the electric shock therapy meant to alleviate all that do him any favors. He was a dead man walking with all the physical illnesses he'd accumulated, but for his mind to fail him also, what else did the man have? Well, sure, he had his wife, and his children, and his friends, and people that loved him. But such is the nature of suicides. The point being that when you have your entire world obliterated right before your eyes, as long as you're still alive and your body and mind are more or less intact, you can always build back again, this being possible through the pursuit of a new passion. Of course, it could be any passion, but not all passions may qualify. Or rather, the passion itself must be a transcendent passion. For how could it be any lesser, if it is to replace and sustain? For one, there has to be something about this passion able to keep one's mind not only focused and occupied for a long time, long enough not to dwell on the trauma, but secondly, good enough that it can transform the damage into something of utility. For instance, after his family is destroyed, the artist may continue on with his craft in order to write the kind of stories that would act as a guide and to give hope to those of similar tragedies, or as a caution to those less appreciative of life because they've not known such suffering. This would in effect give greater purpose to the art, but also transcend beyond the man's life itself for the life of others. I think this is also an essential thing which defines a transcendent passion, the kind which regards others beyond oneself, or serves a higher function. On the topic of higher function, the idea of God comes to mind, particularly because there's a whole lot one can bear, under the belief that the suffering is for a greater purpose, which is God, in the religious sense, but psychologically it is simply the hope for a brighter future. The best people of this nature end up becoming pillars of light and role models of human decency. Sure, they lost everything they held dear and were betrayed by others, but it never made them bitter to the world, or cold to everyone else around them. Their misfortune only strengthened their character, and made them such good people that one would never suspect what tragedies they went through, because they've come to be so good at radiating warmth and good feeling to anyone they encounter. Some become so good at it that their authenticity is baffling beyond reason. They might as well be fictional characters. This is by far the hardest route to take, yet it is not impossible. And in its utmost successes, in an insane twist, the worst thing which ever happened to you becomes the best, if not for you but for everyone else around you because of you. Surely there is no greater idea of good more perfect than this. One may drink himself to death, wallow in misery, or act like it was nothing at all. One may wander aimlessly in hopes that time will eventually heal the wound. But this is the kind of wound which the body cannot heal on its own. It's like getting demolished in a video game for the 20th time in a row, and upon respawn you decide to just stand there. Nothing happens. But if the game is smart enough, you'll be hit by a car. Basically, this solution is the inactivity to slow death solution. Realistically, it's something like being an 87-year-old war veteran suffering from PTSD, which he contracted at 18 years old. I don't say this out of ridicule. That'd be obtuse. PTSD is no joke. It is not even that one refuses to take care of themselves. It could simply be that they don't know how to fix it, and it remains a fresh wound, no matter how much time or decades pass. 3. Drown. This is option 3. Commit suicide. This isn't very elaboratory. I mean, there are grossly various ways in which to go about this. One need not be fancy about it. Bullet, rope, bridge, poison. Go for the classics, whatever, man. This one skips the entire shenanigans of having anything to do with the world. This option says, no thanks.
Hana ga saita yo. Hana ga saita yo.
If you've come so low but still managed to avoid plain and simple, maybe because you lack the courage for it. Or perhaps it simply would not do. Perhaps it simply would not be good enough. This one would have you turn into that which brought misery upon you. In this case, even if you had another passion, it would not be good enough to apply transcendent meaning, and all you'd be left with is bitterness, and no good place to funnel it. So you curse the world for dealing you such a terrible hand, and seek out to become an agent of destruction. So you become colder and conniving to everyone around you. Become an insufferable human being who thrives in deceit and betrayal of anyone that wishes good upon them. And to become even one who would see to it that others suffered like they did, so that they too can understand your pain. Those ignorant, selfish human beings who have never experienced the worst of it, like you have. Teach them a lesson. Go, and kill their families too. In the very same manner that yours was taken from you. You methodical artist, you! Only then will they understand how miserable you are. Become such a person that you climb so high up in your pride, you end up in the lowest place of existence, where you beat your triumphant wings, shedding frozen tears in a vacuum of the coldest, most insufferable, stinking air. Such a person who collapses in on themselves unimaginably, and anything which comes near you is warped, rendered asunder, and is reduced to the nothing of infinite darkness. Anything worth a glimmer of good, made more awful by every second that you exist, so high up in the stink of inconceivable misery. It is not enough to commit. Everyone and everything must go. Become a black hole. Become Satan.